How are y'all doing? How do we find joy in the midst of climate chaos? That's a hefty question, and it's one that I ask myself regularly. But today I want to provide some guidance as to how we can get there. Today I'm going to be talking about two of my favorite concepts in the world: environmental justice and environmental joy. I'll be breaking down what environmental justice means, what it's meant to do, as well as providing historical and contemporary case studies as how people have been able to harness resistance and joy in the midst of uncertainty. But before I do that, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Wawa Gatheru. I am a Gen Z climate activist and Kenyan American. I'm also the proud founder of a national US-based organization called Black Girl Environmentalist. Black Girl Environmentalist is an intergenerational organization working to empower the next generation of climate leaders of color, because we believe that in order to win on climate, in order to build a just climate movement, we're going to have to build a movement that's made in the image of all of us. Now, I decided to dedicate my life to the fight for climate change when I was 15 years old, and it was on accident. I stumbled into an environmental science class that changed my life. And this was because of two important reasons. The first is that I had a teacher that really made sure that we as students understood that climate change wasn't this futuristic issue impacting our mythical and hypothetical grandchildren. It was an issue already impacting the people and places that we already cared so much about. And for the second reason, because I was introduced to environmental justice. So environmental justice is many things. It's a rallying call, it is a legal framework, and it's also a growing global movement. Now, if we look at the presentation, this is the legal definition that many countries use, which believes that all people deserve access to clean air, clean water, and basic human rights, and that we all deserve equal access to the environmental decision-making table. Now, for me, the movement for environmental justice asserts that regardless of your identity, how old you are, your gender, your country of origin, that you deserve the ability to self-determine what a thriving, healthy community is and what your future actually looks like. Now, why is it important for us to even have a framework of environmental justice? It's important because environmental hazards and climate change does not impact us all the same. Now, there's an analogy that I like to use that makes it clear for people, and it's this concept that even though we're all weathering the same storm that is the climate crisis, we are all not in the same boat. Oftentimes, it is women, it is young people, it is folks in the so-called global south, and it is people of color and indigenous communities who are experiencing the brunt of the climate crisis, even though these are the very same communities who are the least likely to contribute to environmental decision-making and have been the least likely to contribute to the creation of the climate crisis in the first place. But despite these issues and despite these struggles, hope is alive, and these communities are really at the forefront of creating some of the most innovative climate solutions in the world. And in a little bit, I'll be giving two really cool examples of Black women climate leaders in the US doing exactly that and working hard to mobilize their communities for good, and who are on the front lines making sure that they're utilizing and harnessing joy as resistance. So the first example is Dr. Joe and Joy Banner. I've gotten the opportunity to get to know these two women over the past couple years, and they are trailblazers. Dr. Joy and Joy Banner are from Mississippi. They actually grew up on the Mississippi Delta, and they are twins who grew up being told their history by their grandmother. They were told about the 1811 slave revolt that happened on the Woodland Plantation in Louisiana. And they were told the stories of their ancestors who fought back, many of them who lost their lives. Now, over 250 years later, these twin sisters have bought back the very plantation their enslaved ancestors were once enslaved on. And they're using those plantations, those spaces that were used for the exploitation of their people, to fight back against the petrochemical industry and to teach their communities about the true history of their ancestors. Now, why is that important? Now, the woodland plantation sits in an area called Cancer Alley, an area that Dr. Joe and Joy Banner know personally because it's where they grew up. Cancer Alley is an 85-mile stretch of land across the Mississippi River, which houses one petrochemical plant for every 656 residents. It is a region that is predominantly Black, predominantly low income, and has been designated as a sacrifice zone by big oil, from international corporations to national corporations, who have identified that community because they know that they have not historically had the political or economic clout to be able to push back against these industries. And together with their community and their nonprofit, the Descendants Project, they have been able to use the spaces that they've bought back to fight back against big oil. And actually, 2 summers ago, were able to successfully push back against a new grain export facility that was going to be placed in their community. These are 2 women who are changing the world. The second example is a climate win that most people actually didn't recognize. Now, on January 26, 2024, our then President Biden announced that he would put a pause on all liquefied nitrogen gas export terminals. Now, this was a huge win, but most people in the climate community actually didn't know exactly how that pause came about. It came about because there was a coalition of Black women climate leaders, many of them from Cancer Alley, who for years lobbied with the Biden administration, went to Capitol Hill, talked to legislators, and organized their communities around making sure that this pause would happen. And it was because of women like Rashida Razain, who's in this photo here, that this pause was successful. However, as many of you can probably guess, that pause has been discontinued as we have a new presidential administration. A presidential administration who doesn't necessarily believe that climate change is real, let alone sees it as an issue that should be addressed. In fact, we're living in a time where we have a presidential administration and many policymakers who are actively fighting back against the movement for climate justice. They're defunding climate work. We've seen hundreds of millions of federal dollars that were allocated to climate change mitigation taken back. And we've seen climate justice work even be criminalized in awful ways. But in the midst of these circumstances, women like Rosetta Hussein, women like Dr. Joe and Joy Banner continue to do their work. And they continue to do this work because this concept of having to fight for a tomorrow that hasn't been promised is not new. We are walking the footsteps of all those who have come before us. Now, a lot of my work, even though I'm also Kenyan, is based in the US and is quite literally a continuation of the civil rights movement. Now, a lot of people in the climate space often see, for example, the civil rights movement as being something that's totally irrelevant or maybe not connected to the fight for climate change. And to that, I would say that's historically inaccurate. Now, I can give you a really tangible example. So in 2018, the world watched in awe as a young teenager by the name of Greta Thunberg began the March for Fridays for Future. And we saw hundreds and thousands of millions of young people walk out of school in pursuit of a better future. But what a lot of people don't know is just 55 years earlier, Black youth in Birmingham, Alabama did the same thing. As young as 6 years old, as old as 18, they walked out of their schools to really show their country and show the world that it was absolutely unacceptable that Jim Crow was a reality and that they and their people were being treated so poorly because of the color of their skin. Now, these youth were beaten by police. They had dogs set on them. They had fire hoses put on them. And even though that was happening, they came back day and day again. And what ended up happening is that the photos that continue to inspire us today went viral. in national news and international news. And we now see the 1963 Children's Crusade as a turning point in the American civil rights movement. And so it's important for us to make those historical connections to show that young people have always led, even in the midst of uncertainty, and that we've always persevered, even when tomorrow hasn't been promised. Now, today, I like to say that I'm doing my own work in that space. As I said earlier, I run an organization called Black Girl Environmentalist, and we are the largest Black youth-led climate organization in the country. Our work is really to ensure that the next generation of Black women and Black gender-expansive youth are included in environmental decision-making, and so that we can make a just climate movement that actively serves all of us. Now, I want to leave with a quote that I came up with a couple years ago, which is this idea that even though we have never known a perfect world, no one in history has ever known a perfect world, we have never needed a guarantee of success to try to strive for one. We have never. And as imperfect as our world has been, we have a requirement for ourselves, for future generations, to do what we can to strive for a better one and to ensure that we are actively loving a better world into existence. And I want to advocate for you all to harness joy as resistance and to know that even though our future isn't promised, we can do what we can to make the world better than the one that we came into. Thank you.
Hello.